So when we talk about cybersecurity, it is not just about the technical edifice that we're talking about, but how people use information and how do we make that information secure and available at the right time, at the right place for the right kind of people. How do we manage access to the right kind of information for the right people? So the three fundamental concepts that come to the fore. The first one is of confidentiality, which is really about ensuring the confidentiality of data, that the data does not get into the hands of people who do not have authorization to have that data. So we got to make sure that data stays protected in whatever domain it might be in. It may be a computer-based system, it might be on a web-based application, it might be sitting somewhere in the cloud. Doesn't really matter, but confidentiality of data becomes a very important aspect for us to consider in terms of ensuring security. The second element that we often talk about is that of integrity. When I say integrity, integrity is that of the data. So when we move data from one point to the second point, from point A to point B, it does not change itself. So we have trust in that data that even though we moved a certain piece of data from point A to point B, it is still the same data that we originally stored in whatever location it might be. This becomes very important in today's interconnected world because data often moves from certain location to another location, from a web service environment to your personal computer, from your handheld device to some web service provider somewhere. You do not want that data to change. You want to maintain the integrity of the data as it traverses different devices and different networks. So integrity becomes a very important issue for us, particularly today. The third one is that of availability. Availability deals with that data becomes available to you when you really need it, which essentially means that if I have a denial of service attack, which many of these companies had a few years ago, Yahoo had one, Visa and MasterCard were subjected to a denial of service attack, as was the case with many other enterprises, then the issue arises is that if data or any kind of information associated with it is not available to the right people at the right time, they really cannot transact any business. So hence availability of data becomes very, very important. So there are these three fundamental aspects of security which need to be considered whenever we are talking about any enterprise level application of cybersecurity, and that is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And commonly these have been referred to as the CIA of cybersecurity. Now there are some other aspects that obviously need to be considered in addition to confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data, and those include things like non-repudiation. Right? Non-repudiation, do you trust the person where the data is coming from? Authentication, has the person accessing the data been authenticated, or have the devices accessing the data been authenticated, rather properly authenticated? So there's certain other requirements that become very important in addition to confidentiality, integrity, and availability that need to be thought about. So several years ago, when we started thinking about confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and particularly as we were going into the new millennium, myself, along with another colleague, decided to revisit this whole notion of information security in an interconnected world. And we published a paper, it was in 2000 in Communications, the ACM, where we expanded this whole definition of security. It was not just confidential, integrity, and availability. Security dealt with making people responsible for what they have, essentially giving individuals responsibility to protect the data that they have. Today, that concept has evolved into data ownership and data stewardship. There are many companies, particularly in the financial sector, where they do have designated data stewards who are responsible for data that lies within their purview. So responsibility of data became a very important aspect for us back then and still is today. The second is, as opposed to integrity of data, we were also concerned about integrity of individuals. Is the individual occupying a certain role who is responsible for ensuring the security of data integral enough, which means has that person been vetted, has that person's background been checked, and so on and so forth. It's very important for individuals to have their background checked and screened if they are going to be dealing with sensitive data. So integrity of different individuals became very, very important. And third was the trust factor. Do you trust the enterprise? Do you trust the business processes that are processing your data? Do you trust the technologies that are handling your information? So trust became a very important, and the people who are occupying those roles, are those people trustworthy as well? And finally, the fourth aspect was ethicality. Generally speaking, in any kind of an enterprise situation, you need to build an ethical environment. It is the ethical environment which allows us to ensure that we are going to have good management practices in place, and that we are going to adhere to certain core business practices and principles that help us enhance security in an enterprise. So what we came up with was that in addition to CIA, which is confidential, integrity, and availability, there were other aspects that had to be considered, and we call them the right aspects. So CIA plus right really ensures good security, which is responsibility, integrity of people, trustworthiness, and ethicality. So those are some very fundamental aspects that have to be thought about when we are dealing with security. So the second aspect I want to touch upon is that of internal threats. There are three typical reasons why people end up subverting internal controls to gain advantage. The first primary reason is personal factors. These are factors which affect an individual, which cause this particular person to subvert those internal controls such that they can gain some kind of a financial advantage, whatever that might be. A divorce or a breakup of some sort. They're all factors that lead to some kind of a motivation for you to engage in this kind of a criminal activity. The second one is work situation, and this is typical when individuals are disgruntled. They are unhappy with what is happening in their work situation, which causes them to take some kind of a revenge with the company that they're working for. And the third is simply an opportunity that they have been working in a given business process. They do spot a broken process, and they do spot that there's an opportunity to engage in some kind of a criminal behavior, and they exploit it. 80% of cybersecurity problems occur because internal employees are subverting some kind of a control, may that be from simply an opportunity, work situation, or personal factors. Combination of these leads to all sorts of security problems that we come across nowadays. The question that arises is, how do we manage these? I personally feel that early indicators in identifying where the personal factors are going to play a role, or what the work situation is. Why is an employee disgruntled? Maybe that person was not promoted or was not adequately compensated. So fairness in human resource practices are very, very important in order to manage such kind of crimes from taking place.